Neil. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I am excited for everyone to get to know the Port Phillip Baykeeper. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yes, it's always encouraging too when we get young people asking questions and wanting to bring about change. So that's a great feeling.
Awesome, thank you. So, as I mentioned, you are the Port Phillip Baykeeper. So, how did you become the Port Phillip Baykeeper?
Well, it's been about 12 years or so now, and it was an honorary role which came about through the aims of Waterkeeper Alliance, which is a global organisation network of advocates for waterways that were encouraging establishment of an Australian chapter of Waterkeepers Alliance. And there was a Yarra River Keeper at the time, probably one of the first, and a couple of other Snowy River Keeper, a couple of other Australian keepers. And it was thought that it'd be a good thing to have a Port Phillip Baykeeper because it is such an important waterway in Victorian context at least. And I was at the time the coordinator of the Port Phillip Eco Centre and had quite a lot of experience since the 1980s in actually coastal issues and particularly involved with the St Kilda penguin colony, and so you know, a pretty reasonable sort of handle on who were the organisations that had influence over the way the bay was managed and the way that people used it.
Yeah, awesome. So for those that don't know, what are some of the roles that you have to fulfill as the Port Phillip Baykeeper?
Well, as I mentioned, a big part of it is advocacy, but with a view to protecting the waterways. The slogan that the Waterkeeper Alliance uses is fishable, drinkable and swimmable. Not that we're going to drink salt water, but anyway, you get the message. So the idea that it's healthy. To do advocacy though effectively, obviously you need to be able to have a good case to make. And so one of our strategies is to engage people in citizen science, so that as well as those people getting more literate about the bay and what to call things and, you know, and understanding what the issues are, we're also gathering evidence that we can use for our advocacy. So it's a big, I see the role very much in environmental organisations such as ours as being community development. Mm-hmm. So as much as anything, it's actually connecting people and just heightening awareness so that there are more informed opinions and voters.
Yeah, awesome.
That then in turn influences government policy.
That's really, really fascinating. It's a very important job. So how healthy would you consider Port Phillip Bay?
Well, it has, you know, quite a remarkable range of biodiversity in it, but like all organisms, if you want to call it one, you know, it has certain illnesses such as that may raise themselves over time. So there are some sort of longer term threats, for example, the practice of disposing of contaminated sediments from the Yarra, which have the silts that are accumulated in the Yarra tend to adsorb chemical contaminants. And so the common practice for them when the Port's channel, the Port of Melbourne channel is being dredged, is to take those sediments and place them in abundant area in Port Phillip Bay, which to my mind is not something that can go on forever, because clearly there's a great risk that might be catastrophic at some point. Although it's out of sight and out of mind for most of the time, it's only a matter of time before something quite dire could happen there.
Yeah, it's scary.
Illness. Of course, there are other things like pest species. So I'm very concerned about northern Pacific sea stars, for example, which eat just about anything they can climb on on the seabed, you know, and therefore have an extraordinary reproductive rate, and therefore have potential to actually alter the ecology of the bay.
Yeah, definitely things to be concerned about. So how, as you mentioned earlier, you used to run the St Kilda Eco Centre. How would you
Mhm.
describe the St Kilda Eco Centre and its role for those that don't know?
Well, the Eco Centre is tries to work in partnership with, we're a not-for-profit organisation for a start, and so that's an important status, I suppose, particularly in terms of securing government funding, grants, and also from philanthropic trusts and receiving donations, etc. But it also means that we have the ability to operate within as far and wide as we wish to. So we're not actually confined by any municipal border or state border. But we do operate on a regional level though, so it's important to know that we try to communicate and engage with the community who have got common sort of geography, for example, and demographics. So the wider Melbourne region around Port Phillip Bay is plenty big enough to cover. So there are common issues and common governance and policies too. So, you know, we can actually work more effectively by keeping that regional focus rather than just a small local focus where the opportunities to partner and collaborate with other organisations would be reduced. Or if we were to go to a national focus, then you've got all of those other things and you haven't really got it's difficult to keep in touch with the grassroots then. And that's one thing we really see ourselves as well connected to the grassroots in our constituency.
Yeah, definitely. The Eco Centre in St Kilda sounds fully fledged and very successful, and I'd love to see an Eco Centre set up in Frankston. So I was wondering, how did you originally set up the Eco Centre?
Well, and that's an interesting point too, because the initiative of an Eco Centre in Port Phillip came from the city of Port Phillip, and timing was everything, I suppose. They were looking for some positives that came out of the local government amalgamations that had occurred probably 5 years earlier, and to show there were some positives about the joining of three former councils into one. I was actually working with the city of Port Phillip at that time in the community development section, and the opportunity to workshop with a group of community members what an eco centre might do and what it might look like and where it could be located came my way. And so that was we actually had a website before we had a location. And but we wanted though to actually be a hub that supported the existing community groups too, so that it gave them greater strength and ability. For example, if you're having a community group running and you want to invite people from the wider community to come along and talk about a particular issue, are you going to do it in your lounge room when you're not sure who's actually going to come, or would you prefer to do it in a public location that's actually got security and all those sort of things sorted out to her? So it creates a stronger opportunity, I suppose, for community organisations who use the Eco Centre as a resource to meet in, but also to network and meet other groups that have got common interests and possibly develop partnerships. So that was the whole idea of it, was just to get really enliven and give greater strength to the existing community groups, and also look to see what other possibilities might come about, including promoting what the city of Port Phillip was doing about climate change, etc.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a good initiative. So I am aware that microplastics and plastic pollution is a huge problem across the world, and I'm sure it's also a problem for the Port Phillip Bay. And I was wondering, can you foresee a solution to the microplastics and plastic problem, considering it's such a large issue?
The reality is there's going to need to be several solutions. There's no one silver bullet, really. But clearly, for example, we need perhaps more regulation of the types of plastics that are allowed to be used in the first place or manufactured. So that comes down to product stewardship, which could be regulated by the federal government and also potentially state governments, to say if you're going to make a plastic product that needs to be of a material that is recyclable and doesn't include any impurities to make the cost of recycling it more prohibitive. So and there have to be systems in place that enable that recycling option. So that's one, but we also need enforcement. So people who drop litter on the street, for example, there's very little enforcement of littering laws, but also you'll be aware of nurdles, which are the plastic pre-production pellets that escape from factories. Currently, there's a program called Operation Clean Sweep, which has a range of practices that the industries could use to reduce and eliminate those nurdles from escaping their sites, but it's not mandatory that they do that. So, and once they do escape, it's really hard to actually track it back to a given site and say, oh, that definitely came from there, So there does need to be stronger mandatory laws about the way that plastics are manufactured and to prevent that sort of escape. And our waste management systems in general need to be better improved. There probably needs to be better street cleansing. If we want to stop microplastics getting into the bay, it has to stop on the streets. And so there needs to be a greater awareness that that's where the problem starts, when it leaves somebody's hand. And so community awareness and education is critical as well. Reducing our consumption of single-use plastics in particular. It's curious that cigarette butts are the most commonly littered item on the planet, and filters of those butts are made of plastic or plasticized cellulose. And so they're a single-use plastic, but it never gets mentioned that they're never talked of as such. So why is it that there's no other alternative product that can be used for those filters?
Yeah, definitely. So I like to believe that most people want to do the right thing. But if this is the case, why is plastic being produced at record levels and carbon still being spewed into the atmosphere at record levels?
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, that the general everyday person doesn't have a lot of control over that. If you go down the shop and you've got to buy something that's practically always in plastic or something, and you don't necessarily want that, but it really takes very concerted efforts to bring about that sort of change. And big industry, they do have such huge budgets that they can operate on, and that does influence government as well. They can say, oh, we're generating all of these jobs, and so they can put a good spin on it. And that's the reality is that the plastics industry, which ultimately is the fossil fuel industry, are really good at marketing what they do and putting that positive spin on it, so that, and really they seem very reluctant to change, which is disappointing. And it's only when people vote with their feet and stop buying their products that they might actually change that. So that's sort of what that is the best option, I guess, is for people to say, I'm saying goodbye to plastic.
Yeah. So how should someone my age be responding to the environmental degradation that is occurring?
Well, I think you're doing a really good job in asking these questions, So that's one of the key things that I think has to happen, is that rather than people just accepting the way things are, you need to be asking questions and getting answers. And if you're not satisfied with those answers, you can make it known, So, and that can be made known. So communication is really a key thing, and you're doing that very well today. So I think any change is going to be really reliant on effective communication, and that could be in a number of ways, such as arts. I'm not sure if you've ever seen our rap video, A Little Bit of Litter Doesn't Matter. but it's on the Eco Centre webpage, and it's was designed to be picked up by a demographic in the community who wouldn't really think about litter and who didn't care and really believed that a little bit of litter doesn't matter. So there needs to be very targeted and nuanced communications to particular sections of the community to actually get them to change their behaviour and their attitudes. So communication is great.
Awesome, thank you. Your insight on the Port Phillip Bay and your just everything you said was so insightful, and thank you for talking with me and doing this interview with me. I think the community will really enjoy it, so thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, Michaela. Keep up the good work.